Do you feel like you should be preparing for everything? All the disasters, all of the emergencies, but are feeling a little overwhelmed by that concept because that's a big concept to try to deal with? Well, take a look at the video that we've made coming up next. We're going to try to help guide you through that kind of overwhelming process to begin your preparedness journey on the right foot and establish a great foundation of preparedness. So stay tuned and enjoy what we got cooked up for you on the other side. Hey everybody, welcome to Cascadia Dispatch today. I'm Casey, and today we're going to talk about some starting points for your preparedness journey. You may have heard me talk about a preparedness journey. You may have read some articles that we've written about preparedness journey, and you're like, what is this preparedness journey that this guy has kind of come up with? The reason that I call this kind of preparedness journey a preparedness journey is because everybody's journey is different. Everyone is preparing for something different. Everyone's situation and context is different. What everyone feels comfortable with when they feel like they're prepared is different. So it's a journey, it's a process. You'll see tons of checklists for bug out bags and bug in locations and all kinds of things, and you can check all those boxes, but that just checks you off for that thing or that one phase of preparedness. And everyone's journey and everyone's level of comfort is different. So it's a journey. It's not, there is no real end destination point unless you set up your own end destination point. So today what I want to talk about is kind of when you're starting out, when you're beginning, what are some things that you should be thinking about? What are some guiding principles that you might want to have? We're going to make a series of videos about this. So this video is kind of going to kick it off, and then we're going to have a few videos that are going to come after it that are going to talk about other areas. So first we're going to get started with, what are you preparing for? Okay, so you've heard that you need to be prepared. You've heard that things can happen that are bad and you should go out and you should get all kinds of items and gear and spend a bunch of money and you know, maybe get some tinfoil hats or something like that. Personally, I think tinfoil hats are very last season and should not be a part of your preparedness journey. But that's just my personal opinion. So the first thing is, whenever you're starting out a journey, you want to know where you're going. And so I use the question, what are you preparing for, as the establishing of your North Star, essentially. What is it that you want to prepare for? And then you use that as your guide when you're deciding what sort of gear, or the timing of purchasing items, or your planning tools. What plans do you need in place? If you're planning to prepare for everything, which a lot of people, when they first start preparing, they say, oh, I want to prepare for everything. I'm going to be ready for all the things. Well, you can't really prepare for all the things. You can't really prepare for all of that stuff. And that goal of preparing for everything sometimes becomes too overwhelming, and then you stop preparing for anything. So I would rather that you have a reasonable goal, that you have a North Star, and that you are continually trying to get better and better prepared for that journey to that North Star, or in case of that North Star, in the case of a disaster, then setting up a goal of I want to prepare for everything, and then not necessarily having the right things or the right plans for the most reasonable situations that will arise. So next we're going to talk about kind of how to determine what you should be preparing for. So when I was getting started with preparation, I came from a background of having absolutely no interest in preparation. I had never gone camping. I had no supplies. I had really no information other than what I learned in school about fire drills and, you know, duck and cover and some of that sort of stuff. I didn't have anything at my house that was supply related or anything. We were just kind of in the world of, hey, something might happen, but it'll be fine. And when I started to read about the Cascadia earthquake and look at some of the numbers behind it, it all of a sudden became a tangible, you could consider it a threat, it could be a disaster, but it was something that I recognized as something I wanted to be prepared for. So for me, I break preparedness in the what are you preparing for into two categories. I break it into your primary event plan and then your secondary event plans. So your primary plan is the big event, the big thing that you think is likely to happen. If you are, for example, in the Northwest, Cascadia subduction zone earthquake may be your primary plan. If you live in the Southeast or along the Gulf Coast, hurricanes may be your primary plan. If you live in the Midwest, it may be tornadoes. You may not be concerned about natural disasters at all, and you may more be thinking about a job loss or a medical emergency, something that would really turn your world upside down in a way that would require additional supplies and thought in order for you and your family to kind of make it back to normal. So for me, the Cascadia quake is my North Star, because if or when that happens, it'll not only affect my family, but it's going to affect a lot of families in the region. And so we won't be able to rely on a lot of government assistance to help us to get through it. We won't be able to rely on neighbors and friends, because they will all be affected by it as well. So I want to prepare for that so that we can make it through, because there may not be support to help us get through that. And then my secondary plans are smaller events. For you, a hurricane that can take out an entire city is probably a good North Star if you are in the Southeast, for example, or along the Gulf Coast or the East Coast. Tornadoes, big things should really be kind of your primary event plan. And then we'll build on that with secondary plans. Now that we've identified the big thing in the primary plan, the secondary plans are the more day-to-day things that could come up. And they play together. So, for example, my secondary plans are maybe a house fire. For some people that might be a primary event. For me, it's secondary because it will really only affect my family, and we'll have support around us with friends and family to get through a disaster like that. They include, some sort of a vehicle breakdown. If we're out and about away from home and we have a flat tire, we run out of gas, there's a mechanical issue, it's going to affect us specifically. Won't affect anyone else. We'll be able to call for help, but we need to be able to make it through until help arrives. Things like a power outage, that can definitely affect a larger group of people, but it's a shorter duration of time. You're probably only going to be without power, especially in a suburb or a city, for 6, 12, maybe 24 hours. It's not going to be a huge disruption, but you want to be prepared in case that happens, because there will be, negative effects and consequences of that. Snowstorms, and everyone on the East Coast can begin to laugh at those of us on the West Coast. But in Oregon, if we get half an inch of snow, we have road closures and school closures and things like that. And every year we usually get 2 or 3 days of a little bit of snow that kind of throws our area into chaos. On the East Coast, you may have, maybe feet of snow that would require that. But sometimes you get feet of snow, and so that might be something that you would want to prepare for. In our area, rain can happen all the time, and so flooding in most areas is not a big issue. But in a lot of areas that don't receive a lot of rain, if you get a huge rainstorm and you have flash flooding and things like that, that might be something we put in a secondary category. Depending on the size, you might put it as a first category, primary event, but for us it would probably be more of a secondary event. So that's kind of how you would define your primary events and your secondary events. Now you may be asking, why is it that we're defining primary and secondary events, and what do they have to do with each other? Well, the reason that we define them is your primary event is going to be, again, like I say, your North Star. When I think about gear and investment in tools and supplies and planning, I usually think about how it's going to apply for my primary event. That is kind of the first filter that I look through when I'm thinking about getting prepared. The secondary events are kind of the fill-ins. So if I buy a flashlight because I'm preparing for the Cascadia earthquake, that same flashlight is going to be able to be used if I have if there's a snowstorm or a power outage. I can use those things in multiple areas. So then when I think about the most likely secondary events, I can either try and prepare for those secondary events and identify the gaps between what I've prepared for the primary event and what I need to prepare for the secondary event. And they kind of play together. And then what you start to realize is that you're building a foundation of preparedness for a variety of things. You are not just preparing for an earthquake, you are also preparing for a fire or a snowstorm. You're not just preparing for a hurricane, you're also preparing for a power outage or job loss, for example. A lot of people will store food in case of a big emergency, but if they lose their job, they'll start to use that food that they've stored to get them through until they have a job again and income, and they can buy groceries and that sort of thing. So again, if you take the approach that, oh, I'm preparing for everything, it becomes overwhelming and you don't necessarily prepare for any one thing well. But if you identify a primary and you identify some secondaries, it becomes very easy then to filter through what you want to do and create a plan that will allow you to really well or really easily identify priorities, identify the things that you need, and then start to build the confidence that, hey, I'm maybe only prepared for 2 weeks for the earthquake, but that's enough supplies to easily get me through a blackout or a snowstorm. Okay, I don't have to worry about maybe those events anymore, and I can focus on something else. So that's why I divide them up that way, and that's also why they play together so well, and why when you're thinking about where to start on your journey, identifying a really clear North Star in your primary event, and then identifying kind of guidelines and framework around your secondary events help to kind of point you in the direction of where you're going to go on your journey. So we're going to wrap it up today. That is the video on what you want to prepare for. Would love to hear what you've decided after hearing this, what your primary event and your secondary event should be. It's always great for other people in the community to know what people are preparing for. It's great for us to know what you're preparing for, because then we can try to build content around common themes. If there's a bunch of people that are thinking about hurricanes, we'll try to make something about hurricanes. There's a lot of people that are worried about job loss. We can try to do stuff around that. So please definitely leave your comments. Let everybody know what you're thinking about, what's on your mind, so we can continue to create content that is not only going to benefit you, but also help everybody else recognize that they're not the only one in the boat. They're not the only one that is concerned about house fires or wildfires or floods. There's other people that are concerned about it too, and we can continue that conversation. So please go ahead, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. Comment below. As I said, the more comments and likes and subscribes and things, the more people get to see our content on Facebook and YouTube. So it's always great to get that support. If there's something else that you think would be interesting, don't feel free to comment and leave us that too. We'd love to hear about it. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week for another video. Thanks.